Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayeti Rudrayatte Takshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So we begin today the study of this text. Let's begin with the very first verse. I'll read in Sanskrit and then a simple translation. You can follow whichever translation you have. Some of the words might feel different, but the sense you will get. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamakav pandavaschaiva kimakurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, Sanjaya, assembled on the sacred grounds at Kurukshetra with a desire to fight, what did my people and the Pandavas do? So this is the very first verse of this text, which has 18 chapters and a total of 700 verses. Uvacha means said. Dhritarashtra Uvacha, Dhritarashtra said. So in these 700 verses, Dhritarashtra has only this one verse. He starts the text. And to refresh your memory, many of you are familiar with the story. Dhritarashtra is the blind king, actually officiating as king. So very briefly, this is a story, the larger text called the Mahabharata, which has at least 100,000 verses. And the Gita is kind of extracted from that larger text and is a shorter text of only 700 verses. It's almost like a drop in the ocean of the larger text. So the Mahabharata is a story of a dynasty. And it's called the Kuru dynasty. And so people belonging to the dynasty are called Kauravas. And lots of stories in it, very interesting, a lot of opportunity to learn from many of those incidents. But the climactic portion of that epic comes towards the end when the king dies and leaves behind 3 sons. The first is Dhritarashtra, the one who utters these first words. The second son's name is Pandu, and a third is Vidura. Now, according to the customs of those days, when a king dies, the kingdom is inherited by the eldest son. And so, according to the tradition, Dhritarashtra should have been the king. But he was born blind. And so the other condition in those days was that if the son, the eldest son, who is not able to carry out the duties for some reason, for some kind of a handicap like he had, then it will be inherited by the next in line, which are the second son. And so because of the rules followed in the times in which this story occurs, Dhritarashtra was not eligible to be the king. And so his younger brother, Pandu, became the king. Dhritarashtra then had, the book says, 100 sons. Go figure how that happened. And Pandu had 5 sons. Now, according to the rules of grammar, the sons of Pandu, the grammatical rule, Pandavas, the word Pandava literally means the sons of Pandu. And Kauravas really mean those from the Kuru dynasty. Now really Pandavas also belong to the same dynasty, But here Kauravas then got referred to increasingly by those who are the sons of Dhritarashtra. So as you can imagine, there was always this kind of a regret in Dhritarashtra's mind that I'm the eldest son, this kingdom should have been mine, but because I was born blind, it went to my younger brother. Now it so happened that that younger brother dies relatively young, when all of his 5 children are still very, very young. And so the eldest among them, named Yudhishthira, he will inherit the kingdom, but he's still a little boy. And so then they decide, according to again the rules of those days, that his uncle, that is this blind prince, or king now you could say, decides to take care of the kingdom until this rightful heir, Yudhishthira, comes of age. And so he runs the kingdom. And as you can imagine, when somebody's just been sitting on that throne and officiating as king for a long time, you kind of get used to that privilege. You get used to being like a king. So when Yudhishthira comes of age, this blind king is unwilling to hand over the kingdom to the rightful heir. And of course, these Pandu's children are very good. They are represented in this story as the forces of good. They don't want to fight, and after all, he's their elderly uncle. And so, with some negotiations and all of that, they finally decide that half the kingdom will go to the sons of Pandu, these 5 Pandavas, and half the kingdom will be retained by this blind king. He actually didn't need to do that, but the Pandavas were very generous to say, okay, let's not fight. You keep half, we keep half, both are happy. But Dhritarashtra's eldest son, Duryodhana, he is very ambitious. He is not even happy with that half a kingdom that he got, which even that half a kingdom he was not supposed to get. He somehow wants to get the entire thing. And so what he does is that they arrange for a game. So in those days, in the Kshatriya caste, the rule was if someone invites you for a game, it's a kind of you could say, an ancient form of chess. And the goal was that if you are invited formally, you cannot say no. And so this Kaurava side invite their cousins, say, let's have this game. And there was also a rule that you could choose anyone from your side to throw the dice. It was a game played with dice. And so on the Kaurava's side, his uncle was named Shakuni, who was an expert. He had some kind of a black magic kind of a power. He could throw the dice and get exactly the number he needed. And on this side, the Pandava side, the Yudhishthira, the eldest son, very virtuous, very good, but he had a weakness, kind of a gambler in some ways. So he said, he was very confident that he could win. So then these two sides are sitting with that game. And they were supposed to bet. So first they began with their wealth, he had half a kingdom, and so on. And finally, as you know, when people who are confirmed gamblers, and it can be very addictive. So this Yudhishthira, he kept on losing until the time came he lost his entire kingdom. He should have stopped at least then. But then it's a form, something that goes to your head, you cannot stop. So then he gambles away his brothers one by one, that they will become your slave if they lose. He gambles away all his brothers, gambles away his wife. It's terrible. That's one of the extremely heartbreaking scenes in that entire story. Ultimately, it just happens that it's a big story. We are not going into the details, but ultimately they decide that these people have lost everything. So one way they could get their kingdom back is by going for 12 years in exile and then 1 year living incognito. And if during that 1 year of living incognito, if they are identified or recognized by someone, they have to go 12 more years of exile, which is the kind of a very difficult condition. And if they can fulfill this 12 years exile and 1 year remaining incognito successfully, then they'll get back their kingdom, half the kingdom. And so these people then go for a 12-year exile, 1 year incognito. Lots of things happen, very interesting in the epic. If you are interested, take a look, read that book called Mahabharata. The real one is 100,000 verses. Don't even try going there. But a lot of condensed versions are available. We have one or two in our bookstore as well if you want to take a look. But very interesting story. Or if you're more of a viewer than a reader, then there's a very interesting TV serial which became immensely popular. And so there are a lot of ways you can familiarize yourself with the story. So then these people complete their 12-year exile, complete their year of incognito and come back, and they need to get their half a kingdom back. By this time, the eldest son of the Duryodhana, he refuses to give it to them. These Pandavas then, Yudhishthira again, not looking forward to a fight, he says, just give us 5 villages. Each of us will just stay in a village and you keep the rest of the kingdom. Duryodhana says, in the book it says, I won't give you as much land as can be held on the top of a needle. In other words, you're not going to get anything. And so a lot of factors come together and there was no negotiations failed. Krishna himself goes as the peace messenger, trying to convince them, don't get into this battle. It's not good. Just agree to this peace deal. You need to give just 5 villages. He said, nothing doing. So it just turned out that there was no other alternative. All the possibilities of resolving this stalemate through negotiation, through dialogue, nothing worked. So the only way was then to fight it out. And so then the 2 armies gathered at this place. That's what the first verse mentions. Dharmakshetre, Kurukshetre. So Kurukshetra literally means the land of the Kurus. And there is this piece, there is big area, which if you go to India and in northern India, they point out the name of the place itself is Kurukshetra now, where this battle is supposed to have been fought. And it's called Dharmakshetri because there was a fight for dharma, fight for what is right, fight for what is justice. Throughout these different anecdotes in that story, the Pandavas have always tried to do everything according to the rules. They did the right thing, they followed the path of justice. And the other side have always tried to just do the opposite. And so now this is the battle really between those who want to hold on to what is right and what is good against those who want to flout all the rules. So this battle begins. Just to kind of give a little preview of what is to come. For different reasons, this clearly battle between cousins. So the family got divided. And for reasons, one reason or another, the Kaurava side, the great grandfather, Bhishma, he was their commander-in-chief. The teacher who had taught archery and taught all this, how to use weapons to both the cousins. The teacher was named Drona. He's on the Kaurava side. And these Pandavas, they don't have any of their elders in their family. All the elders are on the opposite side. On the other hand, the people who are supporting the Pandavas are those who really want to fight for dharma, do what is right and good. Drona and Bhishma, the grandfather and the teacher and some of the elders here, in their heart, they privately support the Pandavas because they are good people. They want to do what is right, but some of the compulsions, again, which we will not go into because it's quite intricate, because of those compulsions, they are forced to be on this side. On the eve of the battle, these Pandavas go to Bhishma and Drona and all these elders against whom they are going to fight the next day to get their blessings. And all these elders bless them. In fact, Bhishma promises, he says, I'm not going to kill any of you. And he is the greatest fighter on either side. In fact, he is said to have had the boon to die at will. In other words, he is invincible. And so now we gather at this battle. The battle starts, and on the 10th day of the battle, the commander-in-chief Bhishma of the Kaurava side, he falls down. Arjuna's arrows bring him down. Now that's a big shock, because he was the one on whom the Kauravas were completely dependent. So as soon as on the 10th day of the war, Bhishma falls down, Sanjaya, one of the warriors, you could say, from the Kaurava side, he held a fairly important position on this side. He runs back to the capital because the blind king hasn't gone to the battle. He's old, he's blind, he just staying back in the palace. And those were the days, there was no internet, no running commentary about what was happening. So he had no news what was going on. So on the 10th day of the battle, Sanjaya, he is the one who rushes back to report to the king that the commander-in-chief Bhishma has fallen. And when Sanjaya now has come to the palace, this is the verse that Dhritarashtra says. He says, O Sanjaya, assembled on the sacred grounds at Kurukshetra with a desire to fight, what did my people and the Pandavas do? Sometimes the students of the Gita point out some of the subtleties involved in the words that are used. He could have said, essentially, he was so a revered figure in the family that whether his children and his nephews, they all looked upon him as a father figure. These people had lost their father very young. And so he could have said, what did the children in our family do? But that's not what the question is. What did my people and Pandavas do? So already that distance has been created. He's looking upon these, and that's where that attachment, sense of attachment comes in. Yes, those are my nephews, but these are my own children. And we can see that sometimes that kind of a dynamic in any family, that one may have nephews and nieces, and one could have one's own children. And while one may say, oh, I love them all, they are all lovely, but still, there's always a little bit thing, my children are my children. They're somehow a little bit dearer than someone who is kind of a little bit removed, being nephews or nieces and so on. So you see that here. So he is now anxious, waiting to see. He knows something bad has happened. That's why somebody has rushed from the battle to give information. So he says, what happened there on the battlefield? When these people desired to fight, anxious to fight, my children and the Pandavas, what happened? Now Sanjaya replies, Drishtva tu Pandava nikam vyudham duryodhanastada acharyam upasangamya raja vachanam abravit. Sanjaya said, seeing the Pandava forces in battle-ready formation, King Duryodhana approached the teacher Drona and said. So he is now narrating what happened from the beginning of the battle. As I had mentioned last time, a popular version about this story is that Sanjaya is kind of giving him a live commentary about what's happening. But that is now how it is in the book. It's not a live commentary. The questions are in the past tense. What did my children do? He's not asking what my children are doing at this moment. So all this dialogue that is occurring here is 10 or 11 days after the battle has already started. And so it's the entire book is kind of like a dialogue within a dialogue. So it's king asking Sanjaya what happened in the battle up to that point, and Sanjaya narrates. And then later on, while he's narrating about Krishna and Arjuna, so the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna is really a dialogue narrated by Sanjaya to the old king. So he says, seeing the Pandavas, so this is just the battle is not yet started. The two armies have gathered on two sides. And then, seeing the Pandava forces in battle-ready formation, King Duryodhana approached the teacher. So the Duryodhana approaches Drona and says the following words. Verse 3. Pashyaitam Panduputranam Acharya Mahatim Chamum Vyudham Drupadaputrena Tava Shishyena Dhimata. O teacher, see this huge army of the Pandavas organized by your intelligent disciple who is Drupada's son. Again, a lot of subtleties involved here. The first question is, why did he even approach the teacher? The right person to go, if at all he wanted to go and speak, should have been the commander-in-chief, Bhishma, who is the grandfather, their grandfather. The problem about Duryodhana is this. His problem is that a great many of these leaders, the warriors gathered on his side, are not come there willingly. Many of them are good people. They know that his side is wrong. The other side is right. They have great love for Pandavas. But for these other compulsions, that they are forced to be on a side they don't want to be in. And Duryodhana is fully aware that although these people are fighting for me, their heart is not really here. Their sympathies are on the other side. And so he knows especially Bhishma, their commander-in-chief, loves the Pandavas. So he then goes to Drona, their teacher, and says, look at these Pandava forces organized by an intelligent disciple who is Drupada's son. Now, this Drupada's son, Drishtadyumna his name was also a student of Drona. So what Duryodhana is telling the teacher is, look, you trained him, and today he has arranged all the battle formation to fight against you. This is how your students are. They are not even loyal to you. But kind of a little taunting way to say as if, what kind of a teacher you are? What kind of students you took who couldn't even be loyal to you? And you can see the difference in approach they have, because just on a day prior, the Pandavas have gone to both Bhishma and Drona, sought their blessings. On the other hand, this Duryodhana, who is also the student of of Drona, instead of there is no touch of respect there. Simply, he knows, yes, you are my teacher, but still I pay your salary, that you are dependent on me. I am still the king. So there is that unequal relationship between them. Verse 4, 5, and 6. Atra shura maheshvasa bhimarjuna samayudhi yuyudhano viratascha drupadascha maharatah drishtaketuschekitanaha kashirajascha viryavan puruchit kuntibhojascha shaibhyascha narapungavah yudhamanyascha vikranta uttamaujaschcha viryavan Saubhadro Draupadeyascha Sarva Eva Maharathaha. Now he's mentioning the names of the warriors on the Pandava side. Here are the heroes, mightily archers, the equals in battle of Bhima and Arjuna, the great warriors of Yuyudhana, Virata, Drupada, the valiant Drishtaketu, Chekitana, and the king of Kashi, the best of men Purujit, Kuntibhoja, and Shaibya, the powerful Yudhamanyu, and the brave Uttamanjas, the son of Subhadra and the sons of Draupadi, all of whom are lords of great chariots, in other words, great fighters. Now, this was not really a custom. There was no need for him to go and tell the teacher, oh, look who are the warriors on the other side. So sometimes this statement by Duryodhana is interpreted to mean he's kind of getting nervous. He's kind of wanting to go and telling teacher, he's not able to control himself. Look, these are all the people on their side. And then in the very next verse, you can see on verse number 7, Asmakam tu vishishtaye tan nibodhadvijottama nayaka mama sainyasya saujñartham tan bravimite. Here also, best of the twice born, the names of those who are distinguished among them ourselves, the leaders of my army. These I relate to you for your information. Again, referring to Drona, a Dvija. So Dvija means twice born. So the idea is the Brahmins among the Hindus, when they get their thread ceremony, so that's kind of, it's almost like a rebirth, being born into now the stage of your life when your formal education begins. And so therefore those who undergo that ceremony, the phrase that gets used is called Dvija, twice born. Now, Drona is a kind of an interesting case because he was born as a Brahmin, but became an expert in handling weapons and became a teacher of all these people. So he's kind of doing a Kshatriya work, but being actually Brahmin. So he's kind of taunting him in some ways, that this is not even what you are supposed to be doing. So you can see in the words that were used, Duryodhana is not happy, is kind of with the whole situation. Also, it's good to kind of remind ourselves once again, because sometimes when we read about this ancient Indian history, the social structure, and speak about the caste and the varnas, sometimes people tend to think of them as kind of very watertight compartments, as if you were born in one caste, you couldn't do anything. In fact, that was not the case. It was pretty normal. As you can see here, one who is a Brahmin now has become a teacher of what would be considered a warrior's duty. So he says, names of those who are distinguished among ourselves. Now, it's not as if these people didn't know who is on our side and who is on their side. So again, it's completely useless talk. Sometimes people do that. Sometimes when people are extremely nervous or confused or afraid or terrified, they just start babbling completely unneeded things. And something like that is happening to Duryodhana here. So he's going on telling, oh, look at the people, those are the warriors on the other side. And now, these are the warriors on the other side. And these elders quite understand that he is nervous, he is afraid, he is not sure. And the reason for that is, even Duryodhana, ambitious as he was, knew the difference between, in a battle, if an army is a committed army, they've come there to fight for certain values and principles, that they are obviously much more motivated than this large army that Duryodhana had assembled. Because a lot of the Duryodanas is kind of a mercenaries. They hadn't come with, oh, we believe in Duryodhana's values and his principles. They were just offered a lot of money, so just, oh, we're going to get money if we go and fight for this side. And so the commitment, although in number, as we shall see, the Kaurava army in number was larger than the Pandavas, but here you had people who were fighting with some values and principles, extremely motivated. While on the other side, their motivation was not any higher value, they were just very mundane reasons. Verse 8. Bhavan bhishmascha karnascha kripascha samitinjayah ashwathama vikarnascha saumadattir jayadratah. In mentioning the names of warriors on his side now. Yourself and Bhishma and Karna and Kripa, the victorious in war. Ashwathama and Vikarna and Jayadratha, the son of Somadatta. Verse 9. Anye cha bahava shura madarte tyakta jivitaha nana shastra praharanaha sarve yuddha visharadaha. And many other heroes also, well skilled in fight and armed with many kinds of weapons, are here, determined to lay down their lives for my sake. Verse 10. Aparyaptam tadasmakam balam bhishma bhirakshitam paryaptam twidame tesham balam bhima bhirakshitam. This our army, defended by Bhishma, is impossible to be counted, but that army of theirs, defended by Bhima, is easy to number. Again, he's just trying to kind of inspire himself by saying, oh, our army is bigger, we are so strong, they are nobodies, trying to somehow hoping that the fear and anxiety that is rising in his heart will somehow be quelled by these kind of affirmation that are made very loudly. Verse 11. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhagamavasthitaha bhishmameva bhirakshantu bhavantas sarva evahi. Now do, being stationed in your proper places in the divisions of the army, support Bhishma alone. And there's a lot of thought has been gone into understanding why Bhishma should be supported. And one way clearly was he was the commander-in-chief. If he is the one who falls down, and as I said, they depended so much on him. But there was also one other reason. Bhishma had made a promise that there was this fighter on the other side named Shikhandi. Again, there is a big story behind that. But Bhishma said, I'm not going to fight. If Shikhandi comes in front of me, I'm going to lay down my weapons. I'm not going to fight that person. And so these people, what Duryodhana is suggesting, maneuver the chariot of Bhishma in such a way, arrange the people around him should do it in such a way that he would never come face to face with Shikhandi. Because if he were to come face to face with him or her, then he will not fight. And so that is one way of understanding this verse. And then let's read the next verse also. Verse 12. Tasya sanjanayan harsham kuru vriddhav pitamaha simhanadam vinadyochaihi shankham dadmau pratapavan. That powerful oldest of the Kurus, Bhishma, the grandsire, in order to cheer Duryodhana, now sounded aloud a lion roar and blew his conch. So Bhishma is almost like saying that whatever you are saying, warriors on the other side, we all know it already. Clearly, Bhishma could see very clearly that Duryodhana is nervous, he's getting anxious, and the idea is you have brought it upon yourself. And now in last moment, trying to say, our army is big and we are going to win or lose. Right now we are here and just let's get on with the battle. No need to delay it any further. To cheer him up then, Bhishma blows the conch. So that's where this, we'll stop here today and then we can have some, if you have any questions or ideas, we can talk about that. This is where the kind of scene is being set. The Krishna really begins to speak in this book only in the second chapter. Actually, the 11th verse of the second chapter. Really, he begins in the second and third verses, he makes a comment. But the proper teaching of the Gita itself begins on verse number 11 of the second chapter. So Krishna hasn't even appeared in the text yet. So this is the kind of a historical background where this story begins. And it's important to kind of understand the context. We don't have to go into too much details. If you're interested, there's always available, the books are there. But to just understand what's really happening, this first chapter is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Each of the 18 chapters has been given a name. It's a yoga, meaning it's a path. It's a path to reaching the divine. And so Vishada means despondency, dejection, grief. And so Arjuna Vishada Yoga would mean it's the yoga of Arjuna's despondency, dejection. And we will see going forward why Arjuna became despondent. In some way there are actually three Vishadas here. First of all, there is a despondency of the blind king. You're like, my children are fighting. What happened? He is worried. Somewhere in the corner of the heart, everyone kind of knows the outcome, but most people on the Kaurava side are in kind of a denial. Of course, there is Krishna on the other side. There is all these greatest archer in the world in the other side. So, although their numbers may be small, there is somehow a feeling that they are in the right and they are going to win. But no one really wants to say it aloud. And as we can see here, Duryodhana is just babbling now. He's just so nervous. The king also knows it. Dhritarashtra knows it. And therefore he is very anxious and he's very despondent. He knows it's not going to turn out well. And so that is Vishada for Dhritarashtra. We already saw Duryodhana's condition. He's so nervous, so stressed out, almost certain that there is no hope for him. So his Vishada, and then as we go forward, we will see in the verses that will follow, Arjuna's Vishada. And what is the difference between the grief and despondency of the blind king and Duryodhana and the grief and despondency of Arjuna? Whether are they same or are they different? Those are the kind of questions we can ask going forward when we study this text in the first chapter. So I'll pause here now, but if you have any thoughts or comments or questions, you can ask.
Hariom Swamiji. Swamiji, there's a nice story also where Arjuna is able to choose either Krishna or his army, correct?
Yeah, there's lots of stories there. I didn't want to go too much into Mahabharata, then we won't be able to start the book. So there are lots of stories,
One observation, in Kurukshetra where the Gita was given to Arjun, there is a temple and there are around 300 commentaries on Gita. They are all placed there. Oh. It is called Gita Mandir.
Oh, good, very good. Thank you for telling us that. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji. Swamiji, I know you mentioned about the forces of good and forces of evil, but somehow when you explained it and laid everything out like that, I felt like the main emotion within me was empathy. Like I didn't view it as like good or evil. Like am I not viewing it correctly, I guess? Because I'm feeling like I understand, where he's coming from. He's so rooted in his ego. I relate to that. But then I also relate to the higher self, of Krishna. But are we supposed to view it as good versus bad? Or is it okay to kind of break those boundaries?
I think everyone should be free to interpret it in a way they see it. One of the things that we have to be careful about, because they say one of the problems in modern times is what is the moral relativism. In other words, people are afraid to say, oh, this is right or this is wrong. Oh, yes, in a way, in this point, this can make sense, this makes sense. So kind of everything seems good or everything seems bad. And that's one way to look at it. But I think in life, when people say we have certain values or principles, we need to say, Yeah, there are such a thing as something that is right, something that is wrong, something that is true, something which is false. If everything gets relativized, then it will be very difficult to, it will be actually pretty easy to justify pretty much anything in life. And then very difficult to say that I'm living by certain principles, because then everything gets relativized. Yes, ultimately, what these texts say is that ultimate reality is beyond these polarities of good and bad and right and wrong. That's true. But right now, when we are in this battlefield, when we are encountering all this duality, we have to accept the duality of right and wrong, the duality of that which is just and that which is not just. So again, but I still feel everyone should feel free to interpret, look at this and interpret in what makes sense to them.
Swamiji's today's teaching, what I felt that we have all kind of emotion, like when we are greedy, we justify ourselves like he did. Even though he was a weak and he was justifying, so everything we all do, I do, and with this Gita, hopefully, I will win over, which is like, it's easy to say what is right and wrong, it depends on the situation sometime comes. Mm-hmm. So with this Gita teaching from you, maybe I will learn something.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, Swami Vivekananda said, to give an objective definition of what is right or wrong may not be easy. Because as you said, with time, circumstances, what may be right at one time in one place may not be right in another place and in another time. So, what guidance can we employ in deciding? And among the things Swami Vivekananda pointed out in one place, he said that one kind of a measure we can have, that if anything that goes to make me more unselfish is right and good, anything that makes me more selfish is wrong. Or a devotee or a bhakta might say, anything that takes me closer to God is something right and good. Anything that takes me away from God is not good. So we can have some such a rule of thumb, so to speak, to determine what is good or not good, because objectively deciding this particular action is good or bad may not always work, because there, with situation, with time and place and context, it might vary. For instance, simple thing, if somebody goes and kills somebody else, that's murder and that's considered bad. But again, in a battle, if you're fighting for a just cause and a soldier kills many on the other side, is actually awarded, is given honored. So in both cases, killing is occurring, but in one case, society recognizes that something that is worthy because you're doing it for a good cause. Maybe you're doing it to save and protect a larger damage being done. And in some case, you're just doing it out of your anger or a revenge or something. Or think about a surgeon doing a major surgery using knife, the way a murderer would use a knife. But a surgeon who is skilled is trying to save life. Now, sometimes, in spite of the best efforts for factors beyond human control, sometimes operations fail and people die. Now, that's not considered murder. Although, so again, is that right or wrong? You can say, well, the action was right. This person was trying to save someone's life, but the ultimate effect wasn't that great. But no one will say, oh, that is a bad thing to do. So good and bad are very context-driven in that sense. But that doesn't mean good and bad don't exist. That there is a way to understand what is right and way to understand what is bad. Again, as I said, yeah, I think every one of us kind of have to figure out our own yardstick of deciding what in my life would I consider good? What in my life would I consider evil? And again, different people will have different ways of doing it. And the way that makes best sense to me, and all of you can think independently of what makes best sense to you, is cutting through all these theology and all these other things, is anything that makes me a better person, a better human being, more unselfish, more kind, something that'll restore harmony in personally or in a larger context. Whatever is done to do that, to restore harmony and well-being, I would say is right. And anything that is contrary to that would be bad. That, I think, that kind of a way of deciding, very few people will have a problem with that. I think so, yeah. Yeah, there are lots of anecdotes and stories in the Mahabharata which raise many questions, and then everyone has to grapple with them and try to find what should happen, what should have happened, and so on. Yeah.
Krishna goes to the teachers before the war, and he says, "You don't want to do this. This is a bad idea." But they don't listen to him, and they have the battle anyway. And then when the battle starts, he doesn't say to Arjuna, "This is a bad idea. You don't want to do this." He says to Arjuna, "You have to fight." So my understanding of that was always, I mean, you could think of it as him telling Arjuna, "You're on the right side. Your Pandavas were treated unfairly. You're fighting for Dharma." But he almost seemed to be saying, "Fight because this is your duty." Like if he was on the other side, he would have told them, "You should fight. This is your duty." So that almost seems like he's taking us. It's a little bit relative context. You know what I mean? Like he's not saying fight because it's right. He's saying
No, that's right.
Participate because this is what is expected of you.
Absolutely, you're right. So, I mean, that's sometimes kind of a criticism people level against Krishna. Well, what kind of an incarnation you are? Instead of trying to establish peace, you're just saying fight. And yeah, so that's why it's sometimes helpful to understand the historical context. Everything was done to not have the battle. I mean, Krishna himself goes as a messenger of peace. So when all the avenues for peace are closed, and when this remains as the only alternative, and the question would have been, even then, if these people would have said, "We are not going to fight." So how far can pacifism go? Because pacifism would mean no fight under any situation. But that's not the point of view being put here. The idea is avoid killing, avoid fight as much as you can. Now, a situation can come in life, because we have been speaking about right and wrong, good and bad. Choosing between right and wrong or good and bad is actually easy. Choose the right, choose what is good. Sooner or later in life, we realize that many of the choices we have to make are not as simple as between good and bad, or right or wrong. Sometimes, what if the choice is between bad and worse? There is no third option. I mean, if it's good and bad, choose the good. What if the choice is only between something bad or something worse than that? So if that's the only choice we have, then choosing bad is a good option. Because if I don't choose that, the result is going to be worse. And that's essentially the principle here. That if these people had said, "We are not going to fight," it's not just about Duryodhana. He was a person without any principle. There was so much injustice that was occurring already when he was the kind of a prince that time, that it would have perpetuated not only their contemporaries, but generations to come. So yes, no war is pretty. The only entity that wins in any war is death. So, and we see that. That's nothing very ancient about it. That's true with wars even today. That yes, we can say we won the war, we defeated them, but people on both sides have died. Families have gotten separated. Orphans, women, children, on both sides. We see that in the wars that are occurring right now in the world. And so, no, it's never a solution, fighting. But there will be situations when it's simply not doable. And so what Krishna is saying, exactly as you pointed out, Krishna's point is not that you have to fight. Krishna is saying, do your duty. Now it so happens that in this particular context, at this time, Arjuna's duty is to fight. So otherwise, if we take Krishna's word literally, it wouldn't say, well, Krishna said fight. So now all of us can go and take weapons and go on killing, because Krishna said, but we have to see, Krishna is not saying fight really, although that's the word, Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha, fight, that's how you read it. But if you look at the context, what Krishna is saying is, do your duty. And in this situation, your duty is to fight for what is right and what is good. So yes, that's a good point. Okay, so we will stop here today. And when we meet next week, we will begin with verse number 13. 13 is not an unlucky number in the Gita, by the way. Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur.